Have you ever wondered, what is all the hype about Pluto? Why is Pluto so special? Well, for about 70 years, Pluto was considered to be a planet. It's not anymore. It has a really, really erratic and strange orbit around the sun. It's actually shrinking. It has an atmosphere. It might have water. And it has 3 moons, most notably Charon, which is about the same size and creates a binary system. So Pluto's kind of special. First off, Pluto was discovered on February 18th in 1930 by Clyde Tombaugh. And originally, it was thought to be bigger than the Earth. Now we know that it's not nearly as big as the Earth. In fact, if you can put a map in your mind of the Earth, like one of those whole maps, and you take the distance from the bottom of Texas straight up through, I'd say Montana, that's Pluto. That's Pluto's diameter. A lot smaller than bigger than the Earth. So, now, why isn't Pluto a planet anymore? It doesn't really have too much to do with its size, actually, which is what originally most people are thinking, well, Pluto's so teeny tiny. No, not much to do with the size. Why isn't it a planet? Well, it has to meet 3 planetary requirements that are now generally accepted. 1, it must orbit our sun. Yeah, Pluto does that. Very erratically and very strangely, but it does that. It must have enough gravity to shape it into a sphere. Yeah, Pluto's a sphere, so Pluto does that too. So the third one, which Pluto hasn't met, is it isn't able to clear its orbital path around the sun of debris and other large objects. Pluto hasn't done that. So because Pluto only meets 2 of 3, it's not a planet. But because it is able to meet 2 of those 3, it is considered a dwarf planet. Now, back to Pluto's erratic orbit. Most planets, when they circle the sun, have a reasonably circular, flat orbit, as in they stay about the same distance from the sun all the way around it. They don't go up or down, they stay right pretty much on a flat plane. Pluto? No. No. Pluto doesn't do that. Pluto, in fact, if this was a normal orbital line, Pluto is 17 degrees off. On top of being oval instead of circular, it's 17 degrees off, so it goes kind of through the paper. It goes around it more so than on it, like most of the other planets do. So, it has a wide oval orbit. It ranges from about 4.4 billion kilometers from the sun to up to 7.4 billion kilometers from the sun, and that's a huge difference. Now, during its perihelion, when it's that 4.4 billion kilometers, or closest to the sun, it becomes closer than Neptune does. Now, a lot of people wonder, well, doesn't it ever crash into Neptune? Well, no, it doesn't, and that's because of that 17-degree incline. It actually passes right on top of Neptune. I mean, not right on top of it, it passes pretty darn far from it, but you get the idea. It doesn't come anywhere near hitting it. It's kind of like one person driving on one side of the Earth and another person driving on the other side of the Earth. They're not going to crash into each other. So, Pluto and Neptune aren't either. Now, because of its erratic orbit, Pluto's actually shrinking. I bet you didn't know that. During perihelion, when it's closest to the sun, Pluto shrinks a little bit. Its actual surface melts a little bit, and its surface is mostly ices and rock. And what it does is when it melts, it turns into a gas. This gas is generally nitrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide. And what this gas does is it doesn't refreeze, it actually just kind of falls off the planet because Pluto doesn't have enough gravity or mass to actually bind that atmosphere to it, so it just loses it. So it creates an atmosphere and it loses it very, very quickly. And that's how it shrinks. Over time, all of this adds up. I mean, it doesn't add up to much, but it does add up. Now, like I said, it does have an atmosphere, and the atmosphere is generally made out of that nitrogen, methane, and CO2 that I mentioned before. Or, I'm sorry, carbon monoxide that I mentioned before. I've been taking a little bit too much chemistry studying here. And because of its size, it can't bind that. And so it's being produced very quickly and lost just as quickly, and that is the shrinking. Pluto might also have water on it. Bet you didn't know that one either, huh? Farthest from the sun might have water on it, right? Well, it's pretty simple in how it might have water on it. If you take a glass and you fill it with water, and then you put some ice cubes in it, and then you put it in the freezer, the first part to freeze is going to be the top layer, and underneath you're still going to have liquid water. It's the same thing on Pluto, or at least that's what we believe. Now, what the water liquid thing is made out of, we don't know. Pluto's kind of far away for us to study. Does the water support life? We don't know. Unfortunately, because Pluto is so very, very far from us, we just don't have the technology to understand it. And unfortunately, Pluto has just started its aphelion move. So it's actually moving further away from the sun now, which means it's moving further away from us. So we have an opportunity right now to study it really, really well. So hopefully we're going to do that, because once it's at aphelion furthest from the sun, we're not really going to be able to study it all too well. Now, Pluto also has 3 moons, Charon, Hydra, and Nix. Charon is the most notable one because Charon and Pluto create a binary system. And in that, they orbit each other. So, if this is the face of Pluto and this is the face of Charon, this is how they orbit. Always facing the exact same side of each other. So if you're on the wrong side of Pluto, you're not going to see Charon. If you're on the wrong side of Charon, you're not going to see Pluto. Originally, because Charon's so large, it's actually about the same size as Pluto. It's smaller, but not too much smaller. Because it's actually about the same size, and when we first started looking at Pluto, Charon was like this. It added excess light and a little bit excess bulk, so we kind of thought Pluto was a lot bigger than it was. It wasn't just our faulty technology, it was also our inability to see Charon. When we discovered Charon, we went, oh, duh. So, what is Pluto? What have we learned? Well, Pluto's a dwarf planet. It's not a planet anymore because it doesn't meet those 3 planetary requirements. It has an erratic orbit around the sun. This orbit allows it to melt and refreeze, thus losing part of its atmosphere and shrinking. It might have water, and therefore a potential for life. Now, what kind of life? We have absolutely no idea. It probably would be far stranger than anything we could possibly imagine on Earth because of the extreme conditions. Pluto also has 3 moons, most notably Charon, which creates that binary system I described. So, Pluto's a pretty interesting planet, and interestingly enough, this is just a little tidbit I have to throw in 2006, the American Dialect Association, something like that, they decided to make the word of the year Plutoed. Now, to Pluto something is to demote it, or to take away a title, much like Pluto was, relieved of its title as a planet and thus called a dwarf planet instead. So, to Pluto was the word of 2006, which is kind of cool. Alright, that's my speech. Are there any questions that you have that I didn't cover or answer? Any questions? Alright, thank you for listening.